we are going to have a new mural in the exhibition. And I think the murals, because you're using this language that comes out of, like you were saying, biographical experience, but also art historical, looking at pop art, looking at minimalism, looking at European still life painting traditions, but also they are very specific to the locale of the space where the exhibition is taking place. And maybe you can talk a little bit about what kind of research you do in your process before you make one of your murals.
Yeah, the murals I realized, and also just wanted to piggyback on something that you said. I think that the gates are also something that are going to show the way that architecture is always changing in New York as well. And there have been a few constants, like things that we know may never change in New York, but we've seen how different generations had different subway benches or whatever the case may be, and so this was my way of capturing that one architectural thing that may or may not exist in I don't know how many years. I think so much of the work is also about the viewer and how they're positioned when they're looking at the work, and it's very much, I think it's just as much about the viewer's perception of the thing as it is about the thing, and how they're reading that. I think I was always very conscious while making of those decisions, like what's actually going to draw a certain viewer in, and another one is not going to be drawn by that at all. And when do these things become abstraction, and when are they actually very narrative and illustrative to some? And the murals are in a way building a context for those objects to speak and to live in the space, because scale is something that I play with a lot. The murals have a way of making you small. You become object. You become the thing that you become one of my objects that's looking at this larger.
I love that idea.
This larger thing. And then the still lives are more one-to-one. These are from my perspective out, and people get to sort of partake, and then their idea of sort of other or whatever is very much reflected back to them. And then I'm thinking now these three-dimensional objects that exist in the space as something else as well. Now you're sort of among those things, looking at these giant murals. But the murals, they're informed by the space, and I've used them to tie together a narrative of the work, whether that's linear or not. But it's more of a because I think, let's see, the one I did in Dallas was themed as a baby shower. That was like the theme of the thing, thinking about certain parts of the country and their politics about immigration and things like that, and then what that neighborhood is, which is a very Latinx heavy neighborhood with quinceañera stores and bodegas and Selena murals and all that stuff, which is super beautiful, rich history. And I didn't want to go in there thinking like, oh, I can just take anything from their culture and just put it in my mural. I'm very careful about that too. If I don't really know much about it and I'm about that thing, I tend to not. I'm like, let's be respectful of that. But one thing that I did know was I can speak from what I do know and put it out there in a very personal way, and I'm sure someone will relate to. And the baby shower was one thing that, and it really worked. It's really, a lot of the times I'm taking a really big chance on how it's gonna be received, and then somehow it works out. It's worked out so far. The one that I just did in Miami was also one of those. Like I was really scared making that one. I was like, I think the mural in Miami was a tough one because I knew that the neighborhood was predominantly Haitian and Dominican, and given that very tense and fraught history between the Dominican Republic and Haiti, and I wanted to be very careful that that I wasn't taking anything that quote unquote didn't belong to me or whatever, and so I took from notes. I had to go back actually to some notes and maybe some journal entries and I had taken screenshots and things when I was in Miami for an artist residency. This must have been 2017, maybe something like that I was in Miami for a few months. And I went back to those notes and I went back to some of those images that I was pulling from, and I thought, okay, so now I can work with a little bit of this and a little bit of what the galleries told me about their location. And I really love that about primary projects because they are a family. They've been living in Miami since forever. They live on the second floor above their gallery right now, so they know their neighbors very well. And so it's a different kind of format for a gallery space than I'm used to. It's so specific. Like every object is telling something about the owner of that space or who I'm sort of constructing. So yeah, that's as much as I could sort of like describe in terms of my process. It's very strange to like do that because you start to realize things that you do when you're making them, but yeah, there's a sense of sort of channeling too. There's a moment where I just like, I know the feeling of the space and how do I make it feel like it with very few objects. How do I capture the essence of that thing and be very economic with sort of with like colors and
that you start with fields of color on the wall, and then their vinyl decals.
Yeah, and I do that. I think that there's a difference to like one big printout, which
right.
is the format that they use for North Park Mall in Fort Worth, in Dallas. And basically, I do it because there can still be changes. I can still, maybe once it's printed and really large, I realize that something should move way more than I had done it digitally or something. But so far, I've been lucky to plan these things out well enough that once they're translated to the wall, they're just as they are digitally.
No, I like the idea of having the fields of color and then like a dimensional collage. And I like that because it does feel like makes these objects like more like they're floating in a field. And so maybe the reference points are more free form, an organic move from the still life pieces. And then, also the bags, which these objects are also placed inside. The positioning of them is important. It's not just a flat field. It feels like, you're making a choice, and that choice is being supported by, it's being emphasized and underscored.
Yeah. And I feel that the progression of the work, I mean, I can tell you that I knew that I was going to eventually move into making like three-dimensional objects. Like I just made this giant domino sugar bag recently.
Yeah.
But I knew that it wasn't the time yet. I wanted the work, like all of my ideas and my series and my things will come way ahead of me making them, but I'll have them there, and I know that the work will evolve to that thing. And I just let that happen, and I let the other series sort of grow. And then usually, like it happened right now, a really perfect opportunity for that form to happen, like happens.
Yeah.
And I think I honestly believe that that's the way that that work should evolve. I feel that you know, a lot of the times we rush things, or we'll because because all of the suggestions are coming in, everyone's going, oh my god, you should make these in whatever, oh you should do this, and we rush that process a lot. But I think that I've very purposefully allowed for the work to grow and relate to each other and tell a larger story. And the show at the Aldrich is going to be you know, I think it's going to be, in a sense, talking about the work in a way that I've finally, I feel like for too long it's been about sort of my personal biography and like all of that, and because it's easy to do that, right? It's like this sort of othering that happens, but I've always been focused on a larger story, which is like, you know, a sort of economy and a history of economics and within, you know, these objects and this stuff, and that's sort of been glossed over to tell this personal story, which has to happen, right? You need sort of like the foundational thing, and then this thing happens, right? The whole coronavirus thing happened right after this exhibition in Miami, and I'm getting calls left and right of people being like, you know, your work makes a lot of sense right now.
Yeah.
Like they're thinking about these people shopping and the thing and and like,
maybe we could talk about quickly that incredible work that you made for the Rob Report. Yeah, because I agree with you. I think I did not see your show in Miami, but I read about it, and I do think that I think there's always been something timely and about your work, and it has a real political resonance. But specifically now, and maybe you can talk a little bit about that piece that you made for the Rob Report.
Yeah, so there's been objects and things that I repeat in different compositions and for different purposes, and that classic, what my friend calls classic white Jesus, is
It really was. It really is.
it's like classic white Jesus. I'm like, oh god. I actually never grew up with that image in my house, but I grew up seeing it everywhere that I went. It was like in everybody's house, and I'm like, what is it about this specific painting that screams out, this is the real Jesus? And and it was the repetition of it, right?
Yeah.
The more you see it, then this is the one that you need to get, because this is the real Jesus. So I used that image and the yellow gloves, which I feel almost has had a political resonance in a lot of people's work. I know Nina Chanel Abney has had the yellow kitchen gloves in her work, and a few other artists have used it, and I use it in a similar way. It's a similar symbol of working hands, and now you know, with everything that's been going on, so I titled the piece "Cleanliness is Close to Godliness," which is something that you hear in your household if you're if you grew up with a religious family, that this is the reason why we're clean, right? It's like God is very clean, and if this is a house of God, then we must be a clean house. And for a long time, I remember that it was like almost an obsessive thing with my aunts and my mom and whatever, is to always have the house be absolutely pristine and presentable, because you never knew who was going to come in, and you didn't want them thinking that, at least what I remember hearing was, you don't want them thinking that this is how Dominicans live. Say about your whole like culture and who you are, you know, like, and yeah. And so now it's such an interesting thing to take those old adages or whatever, and translate them to the current political moment. I think that's always really interesting, because now it's like, yeah, cleanliness means like life or death, you know,
Right.
it really is. And that image of that Jesus is also used a lot in prayer cards and things that are given to you after like during a funeral or something like that,
Lots.
or
Yeah.
service or something like that. And I think once you sort of tie a moral thing, like I would say it's like a moral thing tied to like an ethical thing or something. I don't know. There's something there
No,
where yeah.
I agree with you. Like, there's even tied to it something religious with something scientific.
Mm-hmm.
You know?
I mean, that's a thing. I was also, you know, I read many iterations of the Bible. That was something that I did in undergrad as sort of a project for myself, because I found that everything, right, all of literature and whatever always had these moments, and I do it in the work as well, but these religious moments that they're borrowed from and they're used in, let's say, like, you know, Shakespeare or whatever, that narrative, and there have been compositions that I've had for some of the murals that actually have been, this is like inside scoop, but I've loved Giotto paintings, and those were religious paintings, but he also used, I heard that a lot of his models were like people from his daily life, like, this is the man who sold bread and let me, yeah. And because people didn't have a Bible, because they couldn't read the Bible, they would go to church and see them, you know, see the art.
Yeah.
And that's what informed their sort of imagination of these stories. So anytime that I think of it's crazy how those stories stay stuck in your head, because I remember one story where there's this whole explanation of how certain religious men of cloth would wash their hands. It had to be to their elbows, and that to me has always had this like tie to that. And even and you'll see it in movies after that, that's its trope. It's like, if somebody's washing somebody else's feet, or if they're in a hospital bed and someone's giving them a sponge bath, it's like the sign of like, you know, and so yeah, there's so many ties to that. My initial composition for that piece was a sort of triangular one.
Oh.
And then I didn't do it because I thought it was too obvious, and then I moved it around. But
well, this is awesome.
Yeah.
I'm so glad we got to do this, and I learned so much more about your work and your process. And I'm so excited to actually come back to the studio and start seeing the work come into production. But really excited for your show, February 2021. And thanks so much for doing this. Thanks, Lucia.